Your primary source of confidence, your primary motivational drive is social ability. So this means that naturally, since you've been 12 years old, you've been outgoing, you're a positive person, you're optimistic, you're engaging, love to meet people. And it's essentially, you've got an almost insatiable drive to be building relationships. And here's the key.
Well, to that Wall Street tribe, so glad to have our friend Matt White back, the master of human analytics. Matt, thanks for being here.
Good to be with you guys. It's been a while.
Yeah, this is really, we're just sitting around the table having a good conversation about why I'm awesome and Joey's not. And the tribes didn't get to listen in.
It gets old, does it?
I mean, constant.
It's just so easy to Joey is so lovable. He's so nice. And like, he just takes the berating that we give him and he keeps coming back. It's the Italian style, he just takes a beating and he keeps coming back.
Well, I want to apply this in many different ways, but let's first start out with the fact that why is it somebody like give the listener what Joey's traits are and why he is so easy to beat up on and so lovable and keeps coming back.
Wait a minute. When did this podcast become about analyzing me? Like, this was not in the pre-show conversation.
Yeah, well, no worries.
You're low D. You can roll with it, man.
All right, I'm game. Let's go.
How do we apply this? Because ultimately, I mean, understanding who we are and the people we're working with, the people we're investing in, is going to be a difference maker in our life. We've all hired people in our businesses that didn't work out for one reason or another, or they were doing amazing, and then we moved them to a better position that we thought, hey, now we'll give them more responsibility. They failed. We invested in a project with an operator. They've turned out to do the opposite of what we hoped to. There's lots of applications to understanding those human analytics. We need some application. Let's use it on Joey, and then we'll go from there. That's what I'm thinking.
I would back up and say, I read this from, I think, an HBR article or something that Harvard did. I can't remember. One of those two. They said that there was research where they found out that all humans have motivational drives, which we know about. But then they classified them, and I'm going to ballpark this, but it was essentially all people are driven or have some varying need of autonomy and achievement, need for relationship, and the need for knowledge and expertise. And so those are three sources of drive and motivation, because like all people have drive, but typically in the business world, when we hear the word, or I hear this a lot from clients, they're like, man, I'm looking for people with drive. And what I've challenged them on is like, well, the truth is like all humans, there's obviously outliers, right? But we can say all humans have drives, and those drives are for achieving and controlling the future, trying to control the future, achieving, winning with relationships, or winning through knowledge and expertise and perfection. And whatever those are, whichever is your strongest out of those three is naturally what you gravitate towards. And this is what I encourage clients to think about, and why understanding what your people's, what their primary source of confidence is why that's important. Is if I feel confident in something, then I naturally gravitate towards it. And so then if we can do a good job as business owners of determining like what kind of confidence do I need in these specific, do I need a lot of relational confidence in this role where you're engaging with people, strangers, clients, internal clients all day long? You need a lot of relational confidence or motivation. Then I'm going to find someone who is higher in that trait. Same thing with if I've got let's say it's a highly operational business, like I've got a lot of construction and manufacturing clients that are looking for people that are very good at execution and finish and follow through. Well, that's a motivational drive, expertise, knowledge. And so if we can find those people to fit those roles that require that kind of confidence, it takes a lot of the guesswork out of the question of, man, do I really have the right people in the right seat to achieve the long-term business goal?
If you've listened to our show for any length of time, you've heard us talk about infinite banking and how we were able to use that concept to create over $50,000 a month in passive income. But it's just not that easy to figure out, how does this all connect into my own personal system?
Stallion, that's why we created the passive income operating system, bro. It shows you how to turn active income into passive income. It makes all the steps come together. If you would like to get access to it as a podcast listener, we've never given this away in public before. Go to what'swhatwallstreet.com/PIOS.
And Tribe, just so you know, have some context. So Russ and I have been working with this tool called Culture Index for probably the last 7 years now. And it is the tool that is giving us this insight into people's motivation and drive that Matt is talking about. And so as he is going to be maybe, I guess at this point, potentially talking about mine, wanted you to have some context of where we're even getting that data, because you're maybe like, well, that's great. I'd love to know why Susie, never follows through on anything I ever give her, or why, Matt will never take direction from me because, he's, running on his own. He's too autonomous. These are the things he's going to break down for you today. So Matt, you can keep going, but I want to give that context real quick.
Yeah. So do you want me to go down the street of picking on you?
Yes. I mean, we got to get some ratings on the show. It's something.
Double yes.
Well, so I'm assuming that if people are listening or watching, then they've had some kind of exposure to you, Joey. And so
2 months.
It's safe to say, based off the analytics we've got from, our program, is that I don't remember the exact percentage, but your primary source of confidence and your primary motivational drive is social ability. So this means that naturally, since you've been 12 years old, you've been outgoing, you're a positive person, you're optimistic, you're engaging, love to meet people. And it's essentially like you've got an almost insatiable drive to be building relationships. And here's the key, is that that's what you would do. That's also what Russ would do, because that's also his primary driver, is that this is what you would do even if you didn't get paid for it, because that's who you are. And that's why
some months Russ doesn't even pay me, to be honest. I mean, I just do this for free.
I get it. And now let's go to why you do that. So not only do you love people and you read people and you're empathetic and engaging, but your A trait is on the left side of the normative, which means instead of being more self-driven, you're more others-driven. So A traits, tend
That's
to be
what you're
more
talking about, like the drive for autonomy. Mine is not super high. It's more kind of more team.
Right. Think like when I think of you, it's like your natural is, it's not me, it's we. How do we do this together? How do we come alongside and do this together? So there's much more of an interdependence in that trait than there is in a highly autonomous person that's more independent.
Like,
okay?
Would you say like somebody who's on the higher A trait, like for instance, Russ, like would be more selfish? I mean, is that kind of another way of saying that? Like there's more concerns with yourselves?
But see, the difference is that when you look at my autonomy, it's not, I was surprised by how low it was. Like I would have thought that I was the most.
It's higher. Okay, let me tell you about that though. That's not actually your A trait of why that was shocking to you. It was actually your D trait. Okay, so D trait is measuring.
Explain that.
It's conformity. So it's measuring one's confidence coming from the knowledge and the rules and your expertise. Okay, so for everyone's listening, these people that you're seeing here on this call, these are not the people that you want to trust to like quantify your money, count your money, keep it in order, and like give you accounting advice or even accounting work.
Dude,
they've got to develop
without Wall Street, right? He's not managed money. How many times have you told people that, Russ? Like people are like, "Oh, so this is kind of like you guys. I give you money, you manage it for me." No, we do not manage money. To your point, thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, but there's independence in the A trait because there's a source of confidence from self or ego, but then there's also an independence in a low D. And so low Ds are naturally nonconformist. So you guys tell me it's white, I'm going to tell you it's black. If I'm a low D, why? Because I just don't want to agree with you. And so when you have a higher A, which is independence, and a lower D, negative independence, then you get people who can argue and never get put into a corner. You know, we help a lot of clients in terms of like designing sales teams and things like that. And when you think about risk tolerant, all right, so this is both of you. When you've got high B and low D, proactive with people and relationships, and initiating with relationships. And then low D, which is not concerned with the rules or what we can do or can't do or why we can't sell you this or why you can't do this. That low D is where you get creative, innovative ideas, to your point, while you don't actually manage people's money, but what are you helping them come up with? Ideas.
Yeah.
Ideas. And that's in the low D because it's unrestricted thinking about how we can solve that problem.
Well, and I want to keep bringing this back to you as you're listening. You're trying to say, hey, how does this apply? It's fun to know about Joey and Russ and why they do what they do. But also, I think it's the way that we're built. And Matt, I think I've heard you say this, like almost all of this started and has been ingrained in us since we're like 5 years old. So we are acting on exactly the way God built us when we were just toddlers. And it's hard to change that, right? Now we can learn things and can have adjustments, but our natural instinct is going to do exactly what we want to do. Applying it now to being in the workforce or hiring someone into that. How do I, if I'm a business owner, start to identify the roles? Because I know the mistakes Joey and I made early on is we hired people that we liked, which meant they were probably a lot like us, but yet we were trying to get people to do the things that we didn't want to do. And shockingly, they didn't do that because they were a lot like us.
You know, what's coming to mind is I've got a fairly large client, and I was talking with the founder about they're scaling fast, making a lot of hiring decisions. And I just asked him, I was like, well, how do you really figure out and decide on like, who do you want to hire? And he looked back and he's like, man, I just want to go see if I can have a beer with him. I was like, wow. But yet what he was saying was like, man, I want to like that person I'm working with. And I think that's important. But I'll tell you this, you might really like that person in the interview and for the first few days, but if they start sucking at their job, you will quickly start to dislike them. And while you might not really hit it off with somebody in an interview, like I'll give you an example for me. If I were interviewing an accountant, I want to walk out of that interview and be like, that dude, that woman is boring as you know what, and I don't want to spend time with him. Like that's the perfect person I want for my accounting. Because why? Because I want them to come to work and not want to talk to people and kind of be socially awkward because they're going to be really good with my numbers, you know? So I'm not saying that liking someone is not important. It is. You have to work with them. But I have found, and my clients have found, it's like I start to like the people that are winning in the roles that I put them in.
Well, and I think that's good. Like, so when you're hiring for roles that you're trying to drive business, the more that you like that person, the more someone else is going to like them. The more you're hiring or investing in projects where you want things to be done, you need to make sure that maybe they are more boring. I could think of a guy, and I won't say his name, but he is in the multifamily space. The guy does nothing but investing in an apartment complex. If you try to have a conversation with him, like, you know, like, hey, man, that's awesome. I'd love to hear about all that stuff. And hey, man, tell me about your family. He'll be like, oh, man, let me tell you about my multifamily. I mean, like, this guy does not want to talk about personal stuff. All he wants to talk about is the thing that he invests in. And, you know, as much as I kind of like dog on that from time to time, I'm like, man, but I love investing in him because I know he's going to be like a dog on a bone on that thing. He's going to crush that very thing.
Mm-hmm. You know, I think it's so important at like being business owner of when you know the roles in your company really well and what you need out of them, it makes it easier to figure out, okay, well, what am I really looking for? For example, if I'm a college football coach and a guy walks onto my practice field and he's 6 feet tall, 215 pounds, and he runs a 4.3 40, I just know by looking at him, man, he could do really well at potentially like running back, you know? And so, but that it breaks down. It's just not that clear in business, you know, because if we're sports fans, we've got metrics for all of our favorite people, and that's what makes them great. And you look at their body type and you know, okay, well, this guy is 6'7", he's 344 pounds, and he says he can play quarterback. Maybe he can throw the football, but like we know statistically, he won't make it. He like can't scramble very well. Even if he can throw it 70 yards, he's not built to be a quarterback. And what we're interested in doing as business owners is if all of our employees are our human capital, I think one of our one of the best things that we could be doing as business owners is being students of the game and learning how to identify talent, identifying intrinsic motivational drives that where my people are naturally gifted at and want to spend their time, and then putting them on that work. And I think that's one thing, as you guys know, what we do with this program is when we can measure how much of that personality trait do you need for this role? And then once we can create some benchmarks, it makes it easier in identifying who could be really good in that and who do I need to think about moving somewhere else on the team. Because naturally, about 50% of the world naturally thinks about playing offense and about 50% of the world naturally thinks about playing defense. And if we can just really dumb business down, if I put offensive players in offensive roles and defensive players in defensive roles, as a head coach, I start to win more consistently.
There was nothing worse than walking into class when you're in school and the teacher saying, "Pop quiz day." Why? Because you were unprepared. Are you unprepared, though, for financial freedom?
Don't be. Find out how close you are by taking our 30-second quiz at wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/quiz.
You're right on exactly what people need to be applying to their business. Talk about, you've walked in the door with somebody who's already had an existing business. And first of all, what are some of the symptoms that they've had that they needed you to come in and help them fix? Right? You could tell right from the outset, hey, this is a telltale sign. And then secondly, once they kind of applied what you're talking about now, looking at things through this different lens of human analytics, what was the maybe immediate change that took place as a result of somebody applying this?
I'm smiling because I'll just walk you back through the 2 hours I spent with a client this morning. She owns several franchise brands and a couple of other companies. And she looked at me today. She said, "Man, I'm tired of working." She's like, "I leave the house at 6 and I get back at 8 at night. And I'm just tired of working like that." And so we took one of these franchise brands and we began to diagnose what the issues were. And the issues is, and she's a big time visionary, strategic thinker, high A, low D. Obviously, she's got a lot of companies she's running. But the issue was she was having to get into operations too much. And she's like, it's just, not only am I not good at it, it's draining me. And so I talked about like, what do you need specifically in this, for lack of a better word, COO role. And we came up with like the traits that will drive success in that role. Then, and we're talking about how when she finds that person, how that person is going to work with her all-star that's doing all of this revenue generating. And then we start talking about people. She's like, "Well, I haven't seen many of those profiles." And she types in the software, and this one comes up that's the exact dots or profile that we've been talking about. And I said, "What about this person?" And she's like, "I actually thought about interviewing her for this some long time ago." Anyway, long story short, she's like, "I totally see it. This person has exactly what we need. And so we're going to hire her and bring her in as the COO." And it's like already her face starts to lighten up. Now I know, we haven't seen the changes yet, but the point is a lot of times business owners are coming and they've got a great business. They're making plenty of money, or they might not be making money, but it's usually going to boil down to two things. What I've seen, time and money. So you might be making a lot of money, but are you spending enough time with your kids, with your grandkids, with your wife, or doing hobbies? Like one of my mentors said, "Hey, do you have a $3 million business or do you have a $3 million job? Because in a $3 million business, I'm not in that business, whereas a $3 million job, I'm in that all the time." So a lot of it times that has to do with like who you have around you. And so typically, you like, what are the symptoms? We might be hitting revenue or profitability targets, but it's coming at the expense of you being the business owner and how much time you're having to do that. Here's another litmus test. What happens to your business when you step away from it? And then if you say, "Well, I can't step away from it," then there's the issue.
What you're leading to is what we were having a discussion yesterday on our podcast about the cash flow quadrant, right? So that's really a great example of where the S person is, the self-employed, who is really owns a job, right? They're working really, really hard for the money, but they're not in a position to step away because they don't have the processes and system and the people who can run the business without them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's in the cash flow quadrant. But a lot of times, guys, that's what I see with CEOs of, from companies that are 100 employees to 1,000 employees, that they may have a pretty strong executive team, but inevitably there's one or two people that just, if that's an 8-cylinder engine, the engine's running like on 6 cylinders. And it's like, how can we identify with the top brass in the company? Are they the right people? Now, we can't measure that from a character and a value standpoint, but are they the right people in the right seats? And do they have the capacity to do that work?
Matt, give some examples of how valuable knowing this about the people that you have, like where you've seen a team that was very dysfunctional, meaning that they didn't have the right people in the right seats. And then you're able to come in and do that analytics for them, show them what where people's giftings are. Maybe they were the right people, right? Like there's some people that are on the team that just need to go. But there's certain people that are on the team that, man, they are amazing. They love the company. They love the vision. They just sitting in the wrong seat, right? And where you've been able to come in and help them reorganize that and talk about where they went from and where they went to.
I had a client, this story is like from maybe 2019. And I was talking with the CEO before they became a client. And I had the data on his executives and the managers. And I'd asked him, I saw who he had over the director of recruiting, and I asked him how much money he was losing because he didn't have enough people to do this certain role in his company. He said, "How'd you know that?" And I said, "Well, is this guy over recruiting?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "This is your problem, right?" And he said, "How do you know that?" And I showed him. So they became clients, and then we found the right pattern to jump into that role. They killed it. They took this guy who was really struggling in this role, great, loyal, hard worker. They moved him into director of compliance, pretty different than recruiting. They moved him in director of compliance. And I just recently talked with the CFO sometime earlier this year. And I asked him, I said, "How's this guy doing?" He said, "Matt, like his health has changed." So not only did we put the right person in the right seat, because recruiting, when you think about recruiting and a war for talent, does that sound like offense or defense?
Oh, that's
offense
for sure.
Well, this guy played defense. Does director of compliance sound like offense or defense?
Defense.
Now, I didn't put in there. I taught them, like, here's what this guy is naturally good at. Do you see this? So like, yeah, we see it. It's like, where do you need that? Where do you need caution? Where do you need analytics? Where do you need steady, detail-oriented follow through? And they're like, we got a compliance role. They put him in there, living his best life now. So it's like, that's an older story, but that's the first thing that came to mind was that's a win on every front for the company, for the employee,
Trav, I'm gonna turn this toward the investing side now. I do, we always talk about what the most successful people are doing, right? Is that they're building multiple streams of income, and they're not the ones trying to do all the work. They got coaches in their corner that are helping them do it. So when you can identify the right coaches, you can put the right advisors in your corner. It allows you to get the most out of it. Just like a business owner would get the most out of team members doing exactly what Matt just said. Help us think through that, Matt. Like, how do we know how, when you're dealing with attorneys, you're dealing with CPAs, you talked about, I want a boring CPA. You're dealing with investment operators. You're dealing with people where my money's going. How do you use that same intuition and data analytics to help you make those decisions?
I don't want to say I rule out my intuition. I don't. I use it. But I lean heavily on these analytics because the truth is, it's like you can have a gut feel about somebody, and your gut's your gut's not statistically reliable. It's your gut, So I recommend, I use my gut, and I use it some, but it's after I've got analytics. I see this a lot with clients. If they get to an interview and that person is likable, what happens to bias? Or not bias. What happens to objectivity? It's out the window.
Yeah, it's gone.
Right. And so, and unfortunately, I've seen this cause them to make very expensive mishires, because once they like them, then they remember to get the analytics on them, and the analytics are very different than what we need in that role. Then they're like, well, let's give them a shot. I just got an email last week. From a client I haven't talked to in about 18 months. Spent a lot of time talking about this high-level project management role. And I said, okay, here's what you say you need. Here's who this person is. But he's got a great pedigree. He's got all the right words. He interviews really well. He's great with the team. Everybody loves him, blah, blah, blah. Guy sent me an email last week out of the blue. He's like, man, everything that you said at the beginning, I saw it. I've had to terminate him. Like, this was really expensive. I'm sorry to hear that. But my point is, I don't want to not pay attention to my gut, because there's a whole lot of, I've also got stories of clients where they just rely on the data and they don't do the due diligence from a trustworthiness or a loyal, moral compass standpoint. They're like, oh man, this guy stole a bunch of money from him. It's like, well, I can't tell that, that's a heart issue. That's a moral compass issue. So all of those, both the subjective and the objective, are really important in that decision-making process. And so, as opposed to when you're talking about coaches and things like that, you also can't rule out track record, right? Like if they've got a track record of success and they've compiled that over 15 years, regardless of what our analytics say, that's a valuable experience that you can't pick up in the dots. So all those pieces are important to making that decision. So
if I
a little bit more on where you want me to go on that question.
Well, I'm just trying to summarize a little bit what I heard there. As it relates to where people are investing their money, they're talking to an operator, they're talking to the team of people that are going to be running this investment. The analytics are important from the standpoint of, like, how am I going to interact with these people? But the track record is super important when you talk about, like, their ability to perform with those dollars, like to return those dollars to me. If they have 15 years of having done that, and like you're almost leaning heavier on that than even on the analytics, or explain, maybe I misunderstood.
That's a really nuanced question and answer for that piece, because I'm thinking of a very large client right now in the real estate space, and they're getting teams of people coming from other shops to join their team. And we've talked about, they're like, we're not getting the dots first. This team's bringing multiple years, Rolodex, and revenue. They're successful already. We don't have to get the dots to figure out that they're going to be successful. They are successful. That's a different case, versus I'm hiring, I'm gonna gamble on this person who's 23 years old with no business experience.
I think that the fun part about this conversation is that we all need to know more about ourselves. We need to know more about the motivations and drivers. I want to wrap this up because you said something that I still don't have perfect clarity on, and I've been a student of this for a while, so it's not like just by listening to this episode you're going to have everything. But I do want to give somebody a takeaway. You talked about offense and defense a second ago.
Mm-hmm.
What traits should I look out for and I could visibly see that would tell me immediately that someone's on offense, as compared to what are those traits that I could observe that would help me understand they're on defense? So then I know, okay, when I see these traits, that's the kind of person I want over here. Or if I have someone on the team and now I'm like, oh yeah, that person is a defensive person and I got them in an offensive category.
Well, Russ, you're trying to get me to stick my neck in a noose, and I don't really like it. Okay. You're asking me, what you pay me for are the most accurate, precise analytics that are on the market, and you're asking me a generalized question. All right. So I'll give you my best answer on that. And it will frustrate you because it won't answer your question. Because the truth is, every primary trait that we measure is both proactive and reactive. Okay. So, for example, I had mentioned you guys being on the social ability, your height. So you're proactive as it relates to people, okay? But then as it relates to change, Joey's more reactive. You're more proactive because that trait depends on which side of the normative you're on. But on a general level, If you take autonomy, there's like, if we go back to what Harvard said, autonomy, relationships, and knowledge and expertise. If your primary drive is on your knowledge and your expertise, then that means the more details I have, the more confident I become to make this decision, because the more knowledge and the more detail, the more I'm mitigating risk. That's defense. So if that's your primary driver, mitigate risk, then that's more defense. If it's, I don't want a lot of the details, I want the big picture, and I'm okay with it being close enough as long as we're moving in the right direction, then that's more A, autonomy is leading D, which is conformity. That's more macro or offense. So I can boil it down into more macro where you're more risk tolerant. I like the big ideas. I like the concepts. I don't want to have my hands in all of it, versus more micro where I tend to be more controlling of how everything is going to work and what all of the information is and things like that. And then you can kind of go more macro, which is offense, and micro, which is defense.
No, I love that. Well, Matt, thank you so much. Trav, if you're interested in more about this conversation, go to what'swhatwallstreet.com/culture index. It's CULTUREINDEX. Yes, I can spell, just can't enunciate very well. Matt, thanks again, man, for coming on. Fun conversation.
Absolutely. It's always good to see you guys. Thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Tribe, thank you for listening. If you find value, take time to rate and review the show. That is how people literally find us. I know that's one of those things that you hear us say all the time, but if you haven't done it, do it now. Please, for the love, do it now. That's where other people can get on this show and find out about what we're doing and help us all create financial freedom for ourselves. Have an amazing day.
This has been the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the show to break free of the Wall Street mindset and begin building wealth on your own terms in places you understand, so that your wealth will never run dry. See you next episode.